everybody, this is Joe Joseph, and this is the DailySheeple.com's Daily News Brief. Let's go to the Daily Sheeple, where they have a great piece today, Global Warming World Map, based largely on fake science. NOAA caught in blatant temperature data fraud. Isn't that interesting that it isn't just the news that gets faked, but, of course, we get science that is also faked in order to advance agendas. And this is mirrored the original site, Natural News Network, naturalnews.com. Mike Adams writing, a new look at the world temperature data claimed by NOAA, the chief proponent of the climate change theory, discovers that global warming temperature data and data points are fabricated for large regions across the globe. The NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, simply fabricates data wherever it wants, creating the false impression that global warming is based by credible science. But in reality, climate change is the greatest scientific fraud ever committed on human history because it's a religion in the mind of climate change cultists. They don't feel they need real data. And since they already know that climate change is real, they simply make up whatever data they need to fulfill their apocalyptic climate doomsday beliefs driven by quack science. Now, that's not to say, folks, that we don't see earth changes that are going on, that we don't see changes in our climate. However, it's not due to the man-made global warming theory that they like to push. And, of course, that is central to their agenda of pushing a global carbon tax and other ways to control you and change your life. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to manipulate you and manipulate your life and make a ton of money in the meantime. It's the biggest scam. Biggest scam. And here's the thing, if you take a look at these maps, you'll see that they've got, record heat here, record heat there, and it's their maps full of reds and blues and all this, but they don't have where there's reds and blues and they don't have they don't have sensors. They have no way to measure it. They don't know if it's red or blue in most places because there's no sensors there, so they just make it up. That's what they do. And so I guess the some of the press is pushing back and starting to ask questions, which is weird because, the press doesn't exactly ask too many questions these days that are actually hard. They're all softball questions. And there is a Gavin Schmidt that works at NASA, and he claims that the imagery NOAA has been using is being replicated by other institutions, meaning that there's, of course, when you talk about institutions that a lot of other institutions rely on, NOAA's one of them, because it's a government scientific institution, and you're supposed to be able to trust the government because the government's here to help. And so Gavin Schmidt said, no, it's actually, this is what a lot of institutions use to base their research off of. He's the director, by the way, of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. And he said that the endangerment finding, which is the map that has all the red and blues on it, took years to craft and can withstand a legal assault. I guess he thinks he's got all his I's dotted and all his T's crossed. Now, when Gavin was confronted about his obviously bogus temperature graphs, he defended that by saying, well, I didn't get it. It's not my data. I got it from NOAA. Isn't that interesting? So NOAA is clearly manipulating the temperature data, the global temperature data. They don't know what the heck is really going on. I think they really do, but they don't want to sell it that way because if they do it this way, then they can profit from it, and many people can. Now, over in Congress, a bill was introduced to terminate the EPA. Climate Science News reporting this says the EPA was originally founded on principles of solid science and a commitment to protecting the environment. And for many years, it actually did a lot of good by clamping down on corporate polluters and reducing the contamination of rivers and streams. But today, the EPA is better known as the Environmental Pollution Agency that spouts totally fabricated quack science while destroying the careers of honest scientists inside the agency who attempt to blow the whistle. The EPA, of course, is best known recently for causing the gold mine large-scale toxic spill over in the Animas River, unleashing vast quantities of mercury and other toxic metals into sacred waterways of Native American communities. In fact, the EPA's extreme incompetence remains a grave threat to safety, the safety of nature, and our fragile ecosystems. Now, the EPA, of course, legalized the mass pollution of farm soils and children's playgrounds across America with biosludge. And of course, if you don't know what biosludge or biosolids are, what that is everything that you flush down the toilet. Everything that you put down the drain goes to your sewage system. Your sewage system takes it to a center, a recycling center, or a waste treatment facility that treats it, and then we forget about it. But that's not something that we should forget about, because what happens is once it's treated, and when it's treated, folks, I think they test for 7 heavy metals. That's it. And then they'll either throw some lime into it, a caustic, to bring the pH down, or they put an acid in to bring the pH up. And that's all they do. Then they take that stuff and they pump the liquid to farms that they have an agreement with. Oftentimes you'll see farms with big piping systems and those big DNA-looking sprinklers. Well, that's not for water, just so everybody knows. That's to spray fertilizer over the crops. And that fertilizer is oftentimes biosludge or biosolids. And so we think about this. What often do we flush down the toilet? What do we put down the sink? Down your drains. It's not oftentimes the best stuff. And believe me, they're not eliminating this stuff when they go and they put it into these, quote, fertilizers. A good example of this is the city of Austin that sells a product called Dillo Dirt. Dillo Dirt is a biosolid. It is the solid form of the sludge that is created when they treat sewage. And then they sell it in bags or by the dump truck full. And many municipalities throughout the United States do this because they can make a lot of money on it and because it's recycling waste. So it's green, if you will. But the problem is, and if you think about it, how much pharmaceuticals are we on in this country, or that we take on a daily basis? And then either through, going to the bathroom, flushing it down the toilet, when you pee and you poop, guess what happens? You pee out the pharmaceuticals you may have taken, the whatever you're on for, say, blood pressure, for cholesterol, if you're taking pain meds, if you're taking antidepressants. That just doesn't all get absorbed into your body. That actually goes out of you after your kidneys filter out X amount, after your liver filters out X amount, gets put down into the sewage system, gets treated, gets pumped out to the farmers' fields, or, either through sewage sludge or biosolids, and then it bioaccumulates in the soil. And by the way, the plants that are grown actually absorb this stuff, and then we start eating it. And so you wonder how much of the plants have absorbed X amount of this, these pharmaceutical products, all these chemicals, and how safe is this stuff that we're actually eating? Now, it says the EPA routinely colludes with pesticides companies like Monsanto and Syngenta to grant approval to extremely toxic pesticides that are devastating to the natural world, such as neonics that are decimating, of course, the bee pollinators. And thanks to independent media, we now know that the EPA actively covered up evidence for decades that linked pesticides to the death of pollinators. And just recently, EPA approved yet another toxic herbicide, dicamba, that's been linked to infertility, birth defects, and lung cancer. Yeah, because that's good for you, right? And you know what they'll say? They'll say that, it's just in little, you have to be exposed to massive quantities of this in order for that to happen. Yeah, but over time, it accumulates. See, that's the thing. We're so hooked on the culture of convenience in every way, shape, or form and facet of our lives that we don't look at the long-term consequences or effects of some of the technology that we're introducing, to some of the chemicals that we're introducing, because it makes things easier on us in the short run. A good example of that is cell phones. They've been around for a very long time. Everybody has one. Everybody likes them. They're super convenient. Now you can surf the internet with them. You basically have a computer in the palm of your hands. However, if you want to get on the internet, you need Wi-Fi connectivity. You need cell connectivity. And with that, you carry along a microtransmitter with you that allows you to stay connected to the internet. And oftentimes, we keep that cell phone, that microtransmitter on us directly against our skin or, in your pockets. It's up against your ear, you name it. Even Bluetooth, everybody has their little Bluetooth headsets. And those are microtransmitters. The effects of RF radiation or any radiation is cumulative. Same with solar radiation. You stay out in the sun year after year. Oftentimes, by the time you get older, you end up having skin cancer and having to treat that for the rest of your life. Same with RF radiation. It's cumulative. And if you're exposed to too much of it, it can have serious health effects. This is something now that the cell phone companies are coming to grips with and are publishing now warnings in their manuals of their cell phones when you buy one. They didn't used to be there, but now there's a warning people about RF radiation and the fact that they need to hold these devices away from them and their person. I think Verizon has one that says a quarter of an inch away from your head or anything else. Again, they're microtransmitters, and you may not feel any effects from it. You may never feel any effects from it, but I can guarantee you there are people that are succumbing to the effects of this, and they don't even know what the cause is. And the doctors won't be able to narrow it down because there hasn't been enough research done with regards to this. And if you speak up about it, why? You might get sued. And in this case, according to the Wall Street Journal, Michael Mann is suing his critics with libel suits threatening a catastrophe, if you will, for the climate of public debate. And he's trying to silence his critics and ignore the First Amendment. And the courts are trying to help him as well. It says the First Amendment provides robust protection for political and scientific debate, but it faces a new threat from a climate activist determined to silence his critics. In a case pending before the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, Penn State professor Michael Mann is waging an aggressive campaign of lawfare, accusing of defamation those who dare to question his work. And so far, the courts have given this assault on free speech a green light. Mr. Mann is famous as the creator of the hockey stick graph, which portrays a dramatic trend in global warming over the past century. Numerous critics have cast doubt on the quality and accuracy of his work. They argue that his historical temperature proxies are unreliable, his data presentation is misleading, and his statistical techniques skewed. Even among those who support the theory of global warming, some have singled out Mr. Mann's work as sloppy and exaggerated. David Hand, a former president of the British Royal Statistical Society, has written that Mr. Mann's techniques exaggerated the size of the blade of the end of the hockey stick. Isn't that crazy? What can you trust? That's the question. When we look at news, when we look at science, You have to ask yourself, what exactly can you trust? And in order to figure that out, you have to look at the person's motives that are writing articles, that are conducting studies. And oftentimes you can come to the conclusion simply by following the money. If you follow the money, oftentimes you can find out whether or not the person, the scientist, whether their motivations are genuine. And I can tell you more times than not, dealing with big corporations, with academia, with a lot of these science and scientific organizations, they're not coming from a site or a place of honor. They're not coming from and building their data on a foundation of truth. What they do is, at the beginning, they say, what are we trying to find? And then they manipulate the data to get to that end. Instead of saying, wow, here we have a problem. Let's get to the bottom of it so we can solve it. That's not the problem. Here they generate the problem, and then they say, okay, in order to solve it, we need to spend X amount of billions of dollars, and it's got to come from somewhere. So why don't we start a global carbon tax so that, people don't pollute as much, and we'll have the resources with which to combat this catastrophe. And that's what they do. And unfortunately, folks, for us, it is a scam. It's a giant scam because there are earth changes happening, and we do need to mitigate some of the effects of these earth changes. But they're not really trying to do that, you see. They're trying to make money. The elite are building their bunkers. They're building their hideaways over in New Zealand, in the Ozark Mountains, you name it, that's where they are. And when things get too hot or when things go too far south, why, they have their hideaways to go to. What do you have? Oh, you funded their hideaways. That's right. So while they're sipping Cristal down in their bunker, you are dealing with the serious effects of problems that should have been solved in the beginning, but were never solved because they were stealing your money and using it for their agenda. It's really that simple, And that's why you have people protesting. That's why you have people pissed off. Of course, you have a lot of people that are pushed into it by provocateurs like George Soros and his cronies. But a lot of people are genuinely pissed on both sides, The Washington Post asks, how far can protesters go before the government steps in? The government's already stepped in. The government's already stepped in. Why? Because they take the money from the George Soroses to fund the campaigns, to become the cronies of these kind of people, and then they execute the agenda. They've already stepped in. Oh, but they'll step in some more when all that ruckus that everybody's been causing does what it needs to do, and then they'll step in and they'll snuff you out. It's like, it's kind of like the mafia or any sort of crime syndicate. And police, listen to this too, because this applies to you. The henchmen are always so eager to do the bidding of the boss, right? They go they know no ends, and they will stop at nothing to make the boss happy. But there comes a day and a point where you outlive your usefulness, and they just don't simply let you go because you know way too much. You know way too much. So what do? They kill the henchmen. Look, it's the way it always has worked. It's the way it's going to work. You can do the bidding of evil, but at the end of the day, the evil's going to kill you. So police, politicians, anybody out there that does the work for these nefarious agents, look at history. Look at the way people have been treated in the past and ask yourself, is this really what I should be doing right now? And if I'm pissed, am I really putting my energy and my resources in the right place? I'm Joe Joseph. This was the DailySheeple.com's Daily News Brief, and I'll have one again for you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.